listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. This episode features James Rhee, author of Red Helicopter, presenting a session at Winter Institute 2024 in Cincinnati called Fly Like a Helicopter and Run Like a Lemonade Stand.
I thought the title of this was kind of funny. It's funny, isn't it? I think it's kind of funny. I came up with it. They say, what's the name of the title? I was like, oh, how about that? We're not going to solve all the world's problems in finance, private equity, accounting, and cash flow analysis, and return on capital in 40 minutes. That's not what this is for. I put 4 things I thought that helped me think about things and opportunities, both as an investor or someone in operations. The first one is more conceptual. It's sort of how you approach, is what William was just saying a bit at lunch. It's comparing what it's like to be a helicopter versus an airplane. I think that oftentimes in business or in life, we are taught as kids that you want to be like, other than Icarus to a point, an airplane. And we treat our lives and businesses, and because we treat our lives like that, we think like that in running a company. And the more and more I sort of mess up and fix things and do things, I think a more apt analogy is to be more like a helicopter. And we can go through why I think that. So that's more of a mindset thing. You may find you give yourself more grace as well and forgive yourself for things if you think like a helicopter, not like a plane. The other one, run like a lemonade stand. If we had another hour, I'd make you do it. I actually make adults split up into teams and pretend they're 10 years old and run a lemonade stand. And I note how different the language is they used when they were 10 versus what they're using now. And we're going to do a little bit of this. And we're going to learn, I teach accounting at MIT through a lemonade stand. And sometimes I get these world-class CEOs that come in, they can't balance the balance sheet of a lemonade stand. I look at them like this, I'm like, And so if you think about this morning, about fractal theory, about getting simple things right, it's getting to the basics of some things. It also may help you think about how you're speaking to your team or some of the things sometimes when attorneys get involved, they complicate things. Just think about when you were 10, how you would run teams, the language you would use. And I would ask, does that ever really go away? Like deep inside some recess of your chest, was there a boss when you were 10 years old in a lemonade stand? Right? Like the language. And then the other one, cash and intangibles, is more the accounting. It's what I said earlier this morning when I said I've met plenty of businesses that are growing net income that file for bankruptcy. And the real difference between cash and GAAP, accounting and cash. Like cash, it literally never lies. And if you don't trust me, read any number one of the books that the Vanguard folks have authored over the years. It's just a lamentation about the stock market and that cash is cash. Cash, it never lies. Neither does a balance sheet. Income statement, you can make lie. Cash, you can't trick. It's always true. And then the last one is the concept of expanding the balance sheet, which at the end of the morning session was, remember the ecosystem pictures of people coming? Like how do you keep a very tight balance sheet and then leverage yourself with others' balance sheet? So these are the 4 conceptual points I thought that might be interesting to speak about given the line of work and the type of business that you're in. You don't have an infinite balance sheet. How do you expand it? How do you run it like a lemonade stand, which many of you intuitively do? It's cash. Your inventory purchases are make or break. I know you have return options, but still. And then agility, helicopter. Are we good? That's sort of, and I'm happy to go anywhere else you would like. So we went over this morning, like some of these things that I've found interesting for me is that helicopters, they don't fly as high. They don't go as fast, but they are much more agile than airplanes. And the key to a helicopter is that when you're in trouble, you can always do what? Land. You don't need a runway to land. Like, you can literally land down and you take off vertically. And it's something that, for me, I like to think about no matter where I am, like Harold with the crayon, that I can always land. And you can think about that philosophically, or you can think about that as cash, like how many weeks of reserve, or it's just a reserve. Like, you have to be assuming that you're going to be in need to land quickly. And then in terms of a helicopter, the way it flies, here's another sort of like Buddhist little thing for you. The biggest special power of a helicopter is that it can vertically lift. It doesn't need a runway to take off. It goes up. The reason why a helicopter can do that is because the shaft, it does this and it creates this. But in order to do that, because of Newton's third law, you need a rear prop to offset this. If you don't have this, the helicopter just spins around and around and around. So I like to think about that too, as like everything's in balance. Like, it has to be, no matter how much you aggressively grow, your greatest asset, your greatest strength, it always has to be offset. It always kind of bites you too. And so that's how I think about being an agile business owner. And so what we did in the morning, I just thought that I hope it's helpful to you. By the way, these are the names of the chapters of the book. That these were ways to construct your helicopter. You can think of life as like your brand story, the capital P product. It's really telling that story to your customers. I think even more importantly to your colleagues increasingly. Like, this is what's going on. And that money is the balance. It's the negative torque. I think some businesses tried to be the top torque, the top prop being money, and joy being the offset. I think that given the nature of the people in this room, many of you have gone into this business, most of you, with joy and passion on the top, and money is sort of this, it's got to be in balance, like some modicum of balance, but it's not driving your operations. I may be wrong. I think it seems that way, right? So this is something for you to think about, that if you have a really good story and a brand story, you keep it consistent no matter what is happening, like no matter how much doubt you have. You have to establish the money side, chapter 2, act 2, right? Agency, balance sheet, and then how do you operationalize it? And then on the top is how do you market it and how do you expand your balance sheet with very little financial capital? Like, how do you monetize social capital? This is sort of one way to visualize things. And then this is a lot of words, but this is the philosophical thing that we can sort of skip over. But these are the differences between a helicopter and an airplane. And we've covered a lot of this, right? I think the key thing with a helicopter, you can't carry that many people. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is much more, you have to teach other people to fly their helicopter next to you. Like a bird. You know, birds fly in V formation. I think that is the more modern day org theory about where things are going. The Jack Welch school of leadership was Jack Welch is at the helm. You sit in the back. I'm going to tell you what to do. It's been pretty debunked. His returns were not particularly great. Right? So you have books coming out now. David Gellis, there's another book about Jack Welch. The org theory of the future is much more consistent with nature, where you have multiple people with agency, and the fancy word is distributed decision making. And I think that's the type of environment that you all work in, is that you all do like 12 different things. Even your sort of entry-level person in your store is asked to do lots of things. And so that's something that I take away from helicopter and airplane. And then this is what I suggested to you just think about this. It's like, weaving those two stories, past, present, future, for yourself and for your business. They're a little bit different, but they're not, particularly in this industry. Remember I was saying about this is my red helicopter story, and then I told the story of Ash. There's a real parallel twisting nature of these stories. When you start telling each of these stories and you can convey them in color, brand, your employee manual, it affects how you onboard people. This is why I'm doing this. This is what this bookstore is. This is how they relate in counterpoint. So here's some suggestions for you. It's just basically saying, is there that red helicopter story, that past, present, future? It just moves with you, but it's consistent. Is this helpful? It's like some people say this is a branding exercise. I think it's more than that. I think in this industry, it's much more of an existential story for yourself, and for your customers. To do this well, if you do this well, this is when you have expanding your balance sheet, where the community or local B2B organizations, they hear it and they come and they swap social capital with you. People want to hear what this is. You have to be able to articulate it consistently. So far, so good? A lot of this I kind of covered, not by talking about it, but by kind of doing it this morning, I think each of you can get up on that stage, and you each, I've heard a lot of the stories since then. They're very interesting, right? So just being able to sort of convey that in many different ways. Okay. This, some people say, Brene Brown would say vulnerability. Okay. I think of it like in my book, I write about an upside-down hedgehog. That hedgehogs, you ever turn one upside down? They're really cute. Right? They're really soft and they kind of float. And and I didn't know that. My kids wanted one. I'm like, oh, what? And I turned it upside down and I was like, oh, it's so cute. And I have told my kids, and as a leader, I was like, try to live your life like an upside down hedgehog. And when people jam stuff in your stomach, it's like I take it out and I hand it back to them. And I ask them, did you mean to do that? It doesn't mean only a fool doesn't, it's there. But when you live like this, you see much more. It's just much more clear. Like everything, the perspective's different. So it's what William was saying. The perspective's different if you're upside down. This I would encourage you to do. And then now let's get to the money, the rear prop. So this is part of what we talk about. And I'd love for this to be iterative. When you are 10 years old, let's think about this. How do you divide up labor? If 4 of your friends, say that it's a Saturday morning, 8 in the morning, and one of you has a brilliant idea, let's do a lemonade stand today. It's going to be awesome. So what's the first thing you do? Like say that you have to raise $20, 4 kids. What do each of you do?
Go to mom and dad.
Totally. Go to mom and dad, right? And how much do each of you put in? $5. It's almost intuitively that's the case, isn't it? Like, people often gloss over that. It's 4 kids, $5 each. You pay, you're in. You don't pay, you don't. You're not in. But on the flip side, like if we use grown-up language, each kid has ownership. It's just intuitively assumed that you have ownership in the lemonade stand. That intuition, it doesn't go away. Right? People act like that. What's the labor expense of a lemonade stand? 0. There's no expense. What's the rent expense? 0. What's the marketing expense? 0. It's 0, right? So your gross profit is exactly equal to your net income in a lemonade stand. It's like the purest form of capitalism. Okay. When you say that you have a bunch of 10-year-olds dividing labor, how do you do, the reward for this exercise is to pretend to be really in a kid mindset try to really remember when you're 10. What are the roles and responsibilities when you're 10? All right. I mean, think about when you're 10, like you have a pour, but how do you generally break up duties? You just what? You do it. It's literally, like in business school, you call it cross-functional training. You're supposed to do it. How about this? Who has their sticky fingers in the money box? Everybody. Now compare that to how you're thinking about this as an adult and what's taught in business school or when you're in your bookstore with your 4 colleagues. Is it like that? Maybe not fully. Right? So it's something that the things you take to be intuitive when you're younger, they get a little bit more, it's not quite the same, I guess, when you're an adult. And so when you're thinking about some of the issues I heard before coming here about just, I don't even want to call it labor, it's like people. It's people, there's friction going on right now. It's very complicated to be human right now. These conversations, which I was alluding to before in the morning, this is where it's coming from. Right? These conversations about, like, do you have full transparency into the P&L of, how much of the transparency into the P&L? How much autonomy do I have? What do I get to look at? How much of the reports are secluded? I will tell you at Ashley Stewart, we gave people every piece of data other than individual payroll. Every single one. And I tested them too. I said, if I will teach you, like Friday was like teaching day, but if you didn't show up and want to learn, I said, rescinded. Like, why am I investing this time in you then? Like, it's not worth it. Your decisions are not better. So everyone had this because by doing this, we established full agency. Like, how can I hold you accountable for things that you don't know? So, but if you want in, I'm going to teach this to you and give it to you. If you don't want in, then don't work here. So beneath the dimples, there was that conversation. It was a real opt-in culture where I said, my expectation, you will want to know this. We're grooming owners. And one day maybe you'll start your own business. And so a lot of people think that they wanted agency. They didn't. And they left. And that was okay. So I don't know how often, are you guys having conversations about agency and defining it? And these are social compact issues, so that when you're onboarding people and hiring, we've found that the terminations or the retention, it was much smoother because people said, yes, I entered into this agreement. I said, you entered into this social compact. And we're fulfilling it and you're not. What should we do? So this lemonade stand, the other thing about it is this, is that we all know that say that there are 2 competing lemonade stands right next to one another, which lemonade stand wins? 2 exact same street, team A, team B. Who wins? Who wins in like the most shallow terms, right? Let's pick. Say that I have $1. Why do I pick this one over this one? They're right next to each other. Put it in 10-year-old terms. Which team wins? Yeah, they're more popular. Isn't it? Like, or they've done things. It's a trick question because each of them are coming to this with a T account. I'm giving them only $20 to spend on lemonade, but there's a whole intangible asset on each of their balance sheets that they're bringing to the table. And this is what I was saying this morning about intangible assets and goodwill. It's a trick question. Like, you can't. This is not a state of nature. Like, everyone's coming to the equation with something. Usually, generally speaking, sadly, like the quote, like narrowest definition of winning, the kids that win, they're more well-liked. They're more friends. Or they didn't sort of push the old people down on the street. Seriously, like it is that. And like the neighbors, the team that wins created the more positive externalities in a neighborhood, using economic terms. And so what people don't say is, whose lemonade is better? Lowercase p product. When you're 10, whose lemonade is good? No one. It's terrible, right? You're not buying it for the lowercase p product. You're not. There's something, like it has to be reasonably drinkable. But it's generally garbage. And I'm not saying your books are garbage, but just think about what I'm saying, right? Like I'm learning your industry, right? I realize like the pricing is generally set, right? And then you have to select the products. That is different. There's lots of different lemonade. But like one book that's exactly here and here, the same book, it's the same cup. And so that's the other thing that people often sort of like we talk about a lot is like how are they measuring these intangible assets and goodwill? Okay, so if you find this interesting, I'll probably put this up on my website and you can do a lemonade stand exercise with your team. It actually takes people back to very basic things. This is the business. That's your lemonade stand. Product, labor, accounting, marketing, and financing. And so I often make teams think about how much of their time they're spending on each of these 5 hexagons. And the lines that are connecting it, there are 2 ways to interpret that. One way is culture, your red helicopter story, your value system. The other way to think about this is your tech. It's your information systems. And so what's key, and what I'm learning in this industry, the culture is actually very strong. The information systems, you guys are not getting best in class. Right? So that's something that I'm taking away from this and thinking about, I get that market dynamic, how to solve for that. So this is one way to think about your business. And for those of you, like, pardon me if this is like, oh my gosh, this is so boring, but this is a T account. And for those of you who haven't had accounting, like, it's really important that I tend to look at everything I do in terms of classification in a T account. It helps. It always balances, has to. And the left-hand side of the equation are things of value. It's not things you own. It's not things you can see. An asset is defined in accounting as things that will bring you future value. And then on the right-hand side, it's how did you finance them? Do you have to pay it back, or did you do it from an equity account, from your cash, from your savings? So everything can be broken down into sort of this 1 year and shorter is a short-term asset, and then if it lives longer than 1 year, it's a long-term asset or liability. It's just something for you to think about. So things of value. So this is where it tricks you. Where are your books? Short-term asset. Is it? So one of the perspective change, it is correct to say it's a short-term asset for accounting. Remember I said before, like accounting, it just forces you to put things. Is it? See, at most of the companies, and particularly the more recent ones, the last 12 years, Ashley Stewart, everyone was reprogrammed to think that inventory was a liability. So we taught them the accounting and said it's an asset, we own it, it's going to create value. But mentally, I said, you have to think of it as a liability. Why? As soon as I say that, what do you want to do with it? You want to get rid of it. You just want to get rid of it. It's like, I don't want it. Our inventory turns went something like from 4 to 9 times a year. Because if you think about it the other way with lemonade stands, right? What's the worst lemonade? It's when it gets warm. And so the kids, they get it. I'm like, don't you want to port fast? Receive in, receive in. And so that's what we did as a company. We operated a lemonade stand. I taught them accounting and said, now do it backwards. Does that make sense? You may find, like, just from that little mental nudge that some of your colleagues may say, oh, just because I learned in grade school that these things are called assets, like in my Macmillan Children's Dictionary, like you would see stuff. I don't think that's right. I think it's a liability. And you'll see people just go, oh my gosh, like it changes behavior completely. And then once you start doing that, then you start incentivizing and rewarding that type of behavior from a compensation standpoint, all of it. And this is what I mean about balance sheet compensation. Does that make sense at all? Yeah, think about this other thing, about things of value. This is where it gets trickier. That's accounting. Your long-term assets in accounting, none of the things we just talked about in joy, integrity, character, agility, they're not measured. So they don't get put on your balance sheet. So if you have a software that is spitting out your T accounts, you have to override it and track these things yourself, because accounting won't track them. And so these are the other ways that these frameworks just trick you into sort of saying, oh, this is so simple. Like, anyone have any questions on that? Increasingly, economically, where are we going? Here's the problem right now with the world. Amazon, let's pick on Amazon. What do they own increasingly? Nothing. Like the Amazon Marketplace, right? They used to take in, but they don't own it anymore. So they're basically taking a skim, and the only thing that they want to own is what? What's the one long-term asset? It's data. It's information. It's all your. It's the privacy you gave up without actually really agreeing to do it. It's all in the fine print. None of us really exercise agency in this deal, right? Which is why it's wrong, I think. Like, this drives me nuts. Think about your information software. What's your long-term asset? It should be the what? It should be the same. Data, like cell phone numbers of your customers or preferences, and that gets back to the information system. So one of the things that we talked about, if you agree that the books are more short-term, are liabilities, so what's in the asset account? Well, it's you and your team and your customer information. And right now, the team you can handle, and it's getting more strenuous because of exogenous reasons. But the data, like the information, you don't have the software to handle that right now. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Right? So that is reason to have hope. I just want you to know, like with Ashley Stewart, we didn't have CRM. So we invested very heavily in mobile telephony number collection. So we ended up going from like 0 to like 750,000 numbers in like 2 years. And the relationship we had with the women, I think, is as intimate as you have with your customers. Because think about it, it's on her like leg. Like the phone's on her leg. Like it's in her bed. And so we took it really seriously. We're like, we think we have the relationship to get away with and earn the right to text her. And she always keeps that number forever. Emails come and go. So we made the decision to go more money into mobile. It was more expensive, but we felt it was a better long-term asset. That we would just, we had her forever. And that we had her, when we needed her, we texted her. And so it's one thing as a book industry I would encourage, I don't know the software here, but like what is that? There are cheap solutions for mobile phone number collection that I would be curious if any of you all are doing in a very, very cheap CRM system. You don't need a massive Salesforce CRM system. I don't think you do. I think the cell phones, I think you may see that segmentation may pay off much more quickly. Anyone, is that terrible? Is that dumb? So there are services that are doing this. Here's the other thing that we tricked ourselves into not doing. So in a lemonade stand, like this is how your accounting GL spits out the P&L. So what we did, we took this line, labor, out. And so we tried to calculate what's the net profit before labor. So it would be almost like synthesizing what it was with 4 or 5-year-olds getting 25% of the company each. We said, what's the net income before labor? And then we took labor and we put it on a sheet over here. So we would never confuse the fact that the people working with us side by side were the same as the landlord. And that little mental prime really helped too, because the nature of the conversations changed. Because then we started saying, wait a minute, we have to maximize the pie before labor, because don't we want to pay more of the money coming in from sales to our people? Before then, it was like, yeah, we got rent, we got labor, we got marketing. People talk like that. The labor expense and rent. It's the same breath. So we tried to make that pause and sort of trick ourselves, so we took it out. And then everyone started rallying around and saying, we got to beat up the landlord more. Yeah, that person's not with us at 5 o'clock. Right? It started building a team like that. And then the, quote, labor, not everyone's an owner, right? They said, oh, we do feel like an owner. We're treated like this because we sat with them and said, this is the profit before labor, before people. And then they had all these ideas and said, how about this? Because they were paying themselves. They're like, we waste money here and here and here. That was something that we did very early. Does that make sense? So then all of the things I was saying earlier about compensation expense, it wasn't just, hey, let's talk about your comp. They saw it. And the very structure of our weekly and monthly meetings changed. It was almost like having an owner's meeting, even though not everyone was technically and legally an owner. Yeah.
So are you saying then you would take that, like that pot of money for labor and look at that along with other expenses with the team of like, okay, so now what do we do with this?
We took this, so we didn't subtract labor. So this would be net profit before labor human investment. Mm-hmm. And we would study that together.
Oh, okay, so get their input on those
and
other.
Everything else, because then we taught them and said, this is the pool of money. And we did it in a way that I used to say this. I was like, when growing up, James has Little League, Jennifer needs new ballet shoes. Well, I guess James isn't doing Little League. Jennifer needs new. That's how we spoke as a family. It's like, and people, they said, yeah, like that's ridiculous. Like we shouldn't be spending. It just changed it. Just try it. And then also just for your own self, I know that human investment and costs and labor and salary is a real hot topic now. And that's not of your own doing. You guys create so many positive externalities, and you're not getting paid for them, which we're going to get to, right? Like all the things that William was saying, I was saying, is that you do such good things. It's great. And I used to say this at Ashley Stewart too, and I was like, great, that makes us feel better, and we have to get paid for this. Right? That was the last step in sort of proving our case to other people. This may help you just in terms of some of your internal dynamics. It was a hot topic on the advisory council meeting about it's getting a little bit more tense sometimes, right? The retention's a little bit harder. The conversations are a little bit harder. It's getting a little edgier. And we don't like it. We're not used to that. So these are just some things to change the language. Like all of you guys are a really well-read group of people, right? It's social compact language, agency, and sharing of information, and explaining to them why you're doing this, that we're priming ourselves in a different way. Like this is more combative, not combative, but you're looking at this from whose perspective is net profit here? the owner. If you're not a shareholder, it really should say net profit just to the owner. So if you think about what William was saying about A plus B and then how about the C, this is basically doing that, isn't that? It's saying, okay, let's just look at all expenses other than us. It's a third place, a third way of looking at something. And you're going to start realizing in your own way, just like saying to them, here, you think it's an asset, it's not. So if you move inventory to a liability, and this side has to balance and this has to balance, that means by definition, quote, your equity has come down. If you're increasing your liability, your equity has gone to negative to make it neutral. It's fun because it's in the context of a lemonade stand too. People are like, oh yeah, it's so easy. I'm like, oh, totally, it's easy. You got it. So we did this a lot. Okay? The things that we're increasingly going into, what I was saying about what's going on in the country, the other thing that I explained to people is just because we don't want to own a lot of things, which we didn't, because they're liabilities, and that we only want intangible long-term assets, which create a very agile helicopter, that didn't mean we weren't accountable for things. The problem we're having in our economy, no one wants to own anything, and they think that also means that you're not accountable. Service, returns, like to each other. Right? We become like a grifter economy, like no one owns anything. I'm not accountable. It's someone else's problem. Dead and field, it's no returns. We explain the asset moves and saying the things you're most accountable to about, it's the most old-fashioned classic human duties. But that we didn't want to own any other assets. So it's a very agile operating system. It requires a lot of communication. And it's not that hard because you all did it when you were 10. You just have to remember. Okay, so that's that. I would suggest you do this once a quarter for yourself and for your business. How do you do that? Well, but James, my goodwill in accounting, and like let me give you an example. And this is where this is a little bit accounting and heavy, so I'm going to say it, and then I'm going to say it another time, and if it's not clear, then come to me afterwards, and I'll do it again. Okay? So in accounting, it only values things that are pretty quantitatively measurable, so that you have an objective measurement. We all know that, right? So let's just take retention. The future costs of hiring new people, it's pretty well established. You can just Google it. Different academics say it's 70% of annual compensation to 100%. You can take that number. In accounting, that number never shows up on your balance sheet. The future costs of churning your people doesn't show up on your income statement because the accountants say it's too hard to guess what your future churn is going to be. So it's not measurable. So every year you just expense it. Like the waste, the friction cost, it's just, you can't quantify it. You can't see it. One way you can do this and say that's not true, you don't have to listen to accounting. You can say, I know what my future churn is. I'm 80% sure it's 70% of the cost of that salary. You can put it on your balance sheet as a future liability. It hits your income statement as a non-cash expense. It's not cash. And then every quarter, you track your liability up and down. If you're doing better job in retention, that liability goes down, which means in your income statement it is positive earnings, which means your net income is higher. How about this? My goal is to call 12 local businesses a year to do one little social barter thing a year. The Urban League, Chamber of Commerce, the Elk Club, the Conscious Capital, whatever you want to say. You can come up with an arbitrary number and say 12 events times blank. That's a future asset. And you can put that on your balance sheet. And if you don't do it, what happens to your asset? Which means your income statement goes down. And everyone sees the number. So when you're having quarterly meetings with your team, these intangible things that are not, they become tangible. It doesn't hit your cash, but it shows people it is hitting our earnings right now. This is one of the examples of just unleashing yourself from accounting. Just because accounting rules say to do something, that doesn't mean you have to follow the behavior. Do the things that are creating value and then come up with your own synthesized adjustments. I do this all the time because it's neuroscience. If people don't see the results, if you're not tracking them, they won't do it. Which is one of the reasons why with Red Helicopter, like one day I think you're going to see Red Helicopter wooden toys. I just want people to see it on their desk, and if you stare at it, just like the labor expense being pulled out of the income statement, you behave differently. It's 100% cog-sci, like all the Keltner books and Lisa Barrett Feldman books, all of the books that's what they've written about. That's all Pixar, it's science. Okay. So here are some things that you could track. Like you can say, how do you track this? Well, integrity trust, James, not trackable. Well, I don't know if that's true. You could come up with a qualitative Brene Brown type questionnaire on your employee surveys. Right? Score went up, score went down. Liability goes up, liability goes down. Hit our earnings. Sound good? It may, for some of you, be like, oh, but just pick 3 things. Just 3. And then hit the compensation with it too and say, your bonus is higher because the earnings went up. Oh, my behavior. Okay? Some lessons, quickly. I just want to say this. This is like mean private equity, James, now. I'm going to say it, okay? Your balance sheet never lies. You can say you do certain things and you believe in certain things. The truth is on your balance sheet. Your values are on your balance sheet. How'd you spend your money? It's always there. Your income statement lies. Unless you are doing what I'm saying. It lies. Cash never lies. It is the truth. So many of you probably have a 52-week cash flow or 13-week cash flow. If you don't, I will put up something with ABA, and you can download an inflow outflow. You need to have one. Okay, it's actually something that I want to gift all of you. I want to come up with a bookstore-centric cash flow inflow outflow statement. Track your cash. Yeah, that's it. And the other thing that it's really sort of a mind warp. Run your life through a balance sheet, not through an income statement, and your company. Balance sheet first. You don't own it, you can't sell it. You own it, it's a liability. You can't get into trouble if your balance sheet's clean. It's very hard to get into trouble. Cool? Okay. Joy. Here are some things that, let me see if I have 2 minutes. I will send these slides to you, but like differentiating between net wealth and net worth, I think that language is very important. Like net wealth is more, to me, financial net wealth. Net worth is different. And those are some of the intangible, like goodwill assets, intellectual training, and like general education for your employee, for yourself, your wellness. I'm going to go here. I only have 1 minute. I think that this might be a helpful exercise for you all to do. This is in terms of leveraging your balance sheet. That's me, obviously. Use your own photo, it's like, I just want to be very clear. That's me, and that's me. But put yourself in there. And this is, for those of you who don't have a fancy CRM system, fill in this. Here are my fellow retail partners. Fill in the blank. 1 degree removed. Fill in the blank. Education. Here are the local high schools, the colleges, the community college. 1 degree removed. Keep doing it. And then with each institution bubble, put a name on it. Who can deliver that for me? 1 phone call. So if you have an event, say that you have Brene Brown's coming to town. So here's 6, 7 circles times 4 major bubbles, 28 texts go out. 28 people will deliver those bubbles for you. And each of those bubbles have 5,000 potential customers. So I draw this for myself and for companies. I don't know if you all have this, but it's a way to keep yourself honest too, every quarter to fill out these bubbles and say 28 phone calls, whatever, pick a number. This is your sort of hatchet job but effective CRM system. You don't have to wait for software at this point, 28, and this is your ecosystem. And remember that slide that I put up with Lonnie Love and you can build that. And when you start building that in pictures, guess who else can see it? It's your colleagues. They can't visualize what goodwill means, and so make it visual to them. And those are my quick 4 in 40 minutes. If I were sitting with you as your business partner, first week we would just we would do 4 of these things, and then we would sit for 3 months and see how it goes and keep pushing. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA website at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!